The sun over New Daegu was warm and gentle. It shone on the fields of green plants that stretched out to the soft hills. This was a peaceful world, a quiet world. It was a world of gardens and small, happy communities. The air smelled of wet earth and growing things. In a small house at the edge of a wide field, a man named Jin was fixing a small, broken robot. The robot was supposed to pull weeds, but it had stopped working. Jin was an engineer. He liked to understand how things worked and to fix them. His hands were careful and sure. He had been a soldier once, a long time ago, but he had left that life behind. Here he was just Jin, a husband, a father. His wife Mireille came out of the house. She carried a tray with 2 cups of tea. She was a botanist, a scientist who studied plants. Her life was about helping things grow. She smiled at Jin, a smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. She placed the tray on the wooden table beside him. "Any luck with the little helper?" she asked, her voice soft. "Almost," Jin said, not looking up from the robot's insides. "It just had a loose wire. It's an easy fix. This was their life. Easy fixes, quiet afternoons, the smell of tea and the feeling of the sun on their skin." Their son, Day, came running from the field. He was 6 years old, his clothes dirty from playing. In his hand, he held a bright blue flower. "Look, Papa, for Mama," he said, his voice full of excitement. He gave the flower to Mireille. She took it and tucked it into her hair. "It's beautiful, my Day, thank you." Day then turned to the robot. "Is it better now? Can it play with me?" Jin laughed. "It's a worker, son, not a toy. But yes, it's better." He closed the panel on the robot and pressed a button. The little machine whirred to life, beeped happily, and rolled off towards the garden to do its job. Day clapped his hands and ran after it. Jin looked at Mireille. He reached out and took her hand. They didn't need to say anything. The silence between them was warm and full of love. This was the life they had built. This was their garden. High above this quiet scene, in the cold, empty space near the colony, something changed. At first, it was just a flicker on a screen in the colony's small space traffic office. The officer on duty, a young man named Min, thought it was a sensor ghost. But the flicker grew. It became a blot. Then the blot became many blots, dozens, then hundreds. Alarms began to sound, a soft, worried beeping. Min's eyes went wide. He opened a channel to the colony leader. "Sir, we have contacts, unidentified, many of them. They just appeared." The voice from the other end was calm. "Try to hail them." Standard welcome message. Min sent the message. "Welcome to New Daegu. Please identify yourselves." There was no answer. The ships kept coming. They were not like human ships. They were sharp and angular, like crystals or dark glass. They moved in a perfect silent formation. They were beautiful and they were terrifying. They filled the sky. On the ground, the gentle afternoon light began to fade. A deep shadow fell over the house, over the field, over Jin and Mireille and Day. Jin looked up. The sky, which had been a clear, soft blue, was now black with ships. They were so many they blocked out the sun. The world became cold and dark. "Jin," Mireille said, her voice a whisper. She held his hand tighter. Day ran back to them, scared, and clung to his father's leg. "Papa, what are those?" Jin's soldier instincts, buried for years, surged to the surface. He felt a cold fear in his stomach. These were not visitors. This was an invasion. But the scale of it was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The colony's emergency sirens began to wail, a loud screaming sound that cut through the quiet air. People came out of their houses, looking up at the sky, their faces confused and frightened. Then, a voice boomed from the lead ship. It was not a human voice. It was a cold digital sound that echoed across the entire planet. "This system is claimed by the Kalan sovereign. The organic infestation will be cleansed." There was no offer to surrender, no demand, just a statement of fact. On the lead ship, the Kalan commander looked down at the green and blue world. To him, it was not a home. It was not a garden. It was a problem, a weed, and weeds must be pulled out by the root. He gave a single silent order. A part of the biggest ship glowed with a terrible purple light. The light gathered into a single point, growing brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at. On the ground, Jin knew. He knew what was about to happen. There were no soldiers to fight, no ships to launch. There was only this moment. He pulled Mireille and Day into a tight embrace. He held them close, trying to shield them with his own body. He looked into Mirai's eyes. He saw her love and her terror. He saw the same in Day's small face. "I love you," Jin said, his voice steady. "I love you both." The purple light from the ship flashed. It did not strike a city. It did not cause a fire. It struck the planet itself. A beam of pure energy slammed into the planet's core. The ground did not just shake. It tore itself apart. Huge cracks miles wide opened in the earth. The air itself caught fire. Mountains melted. The oceans boiled away in a great cloud of steam. The peaceful green world of New Daegu was being unmade in seconds. Jin held his family as the world ended around them. He felt the heat. He saw the light. And then he felt nothing. But Jin was not on the planet. At that exact moment, Jin was in a small mining pod, floating near a moon far from New Daegu. He had gone there for a short, 2-day trip to repair a broken sensor array. He was watching the live video feed from his home. He had it on a small screen next to his control panel. He was smiling, watching Mirai tend to her flowers and Day play with his toy spaceship. He saw the shadow fall over them. He saw them look up. He saw the fear on their faces. His smile vanished. His blood ran cold. He heard the Kalan message. His heart hammered in his chest. He was too far away. He could do nothing. No. No, 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 he whispered, his hands gripping the edge of the console. He saw himself on the screen, running to hold them. He saw the purple light flash. The video feed from his house went white, then black. The data feed from the colony's main network screamed with warnings for 1 second. Reports of crustal collapse, atmospheric ignition, total planetary destruction, and then it too went silent. Jin was alone. He floated in the complete silence of his pod. The only sound was the low hum of the life support system. On his screen, where his family had been just moments before, there was now only a message. Signal lost. He stared out the viewport. Where the green and blue marble of New Daegu had hung in space, there was now an expanding cloud of dust and rock, glowing with a faint, ugly red light. It was the corpse of a world. The grave of his wife. The grave of his son. The vast Kalan fleet, its work done, turned as one. Their ships moved with a calm, unhurried grace. They did not look back. They simply moved on as if they had swatted a fly, and now headed towards their next task. Jin did not move. He did not cry. He did not scream. He sat in his chair, perfectly still. The cold of space seeped into his heart. The quiet, gentle man he had been was gone. The engineer who fixed things was gone. All that was left was the silence, the dust, and a cold, hard feeling that was starting to burn in his chest. It was a feeling he had not felt since his soldier days. It was wrath. The news traveled to Earth at the speed of light. It was a simple, terrible message. A string of data that meant one thing. New Daegu was gone. At first, there was silence in the command centers. People stared at their screens, unable to understand. Then the silence broke. A low murmur of disbelief grew into a roar of confusion and fear. The news spread across the planet. People gathered in streets in front of screens, their faces pale. A whole colony wiped out. Millions of people just gone. The leaders of Earth held a meeting. The room was large and quiet. A general slammed his fist on the table. "We must strike back. Now," he shouted. "We must show them we are not afraid." But others were afraid. They were very afraid. An admiral named Jun spoke. He was a calm man with a quiet voice. He did not shout. "How?" he asked. "Look at the data. One ship, one shot. They destroyed an entire world. Our strongest warship is like a toy next to that. If we attack them directly, they will destroy Earth just as easily." The room fell silent again. The general looked down. He knew Jun was right. The public wanted action. They wanted revenge. But the leaders in the military knew the truth. Humanity was like an ant looking up at a boot. The boot had just crushed another anthill, and it was about to take another step. In a quiet laboratory away from the shouting, a young woman named Hana worked. She was a scientist. Her world was one of numbers and patterns. While others felt anger, she felt a cold curiosity. She played the sensor data from New Daegu's last moments over and over. She watched the Kalan ship. She saw the purple light gather and fire. She was not looking at the destruction. She was looking at the ship. She noticed something. A tiny detail. A flicker. Just after the big weapon fired, The ship's powerful energy shields dipped. It was a very small dip. It lasted for less than a second. But it was there. It was a pattern. A weakness. Hana worked for 3 days without sleep. She drank coffee and stared at her screens. She built models and ran simulations. The Kalon technology was far ahead of humanity's. Their ships were stronger, their weapons were better. In a straight fight, humanity would lose. So, Hana thought, we must not fight a straight fight. She finally left her lab. She went to see Admiral June. She walked into his office. Her clothes were wrinkled and she had dark circles under her eyes. But her eyes themselves were sharp and clear. "Admiral," she said, "I have a plan." June listened. He was a practical man. He liked plans. "Their strength is their biggest weakness," Hana began. "They have a few giant, powerful ships. We cannot build one ship as powerful as theirs, so we will not try." She put a datapad on his desk. It showed a design. A small, simple ship. It was little more than an engine, a cockpit, and a big bomb. "We will build 10,000 of these," Hana said. "No, 100,000. 1,000,000. June looked at the design. "A suicide ship?" he asked, his voice heavy. "It is a weapon with one purpose," Hana said. "It is cheap, it is fast. We can build them very quickly. Their big gun can only shoot one of our ships at a time, but if 1,000 of these small ships attack at once, their big gun is useless. They cannot shoot them all." She showed him the second part of her plan, a huge factory ship. It would travel with the fleet. It would eat asteroids and moons. It would use the raw materials to build more of the small fighter ships right there, in the middle of space. The enemy would have to fight not just one fleet, but a constantly growing swarm. "They think we are an infestation to be cleaned," Hana said, her voice cold. "So we will act like one. We will swarm them. We will be everywhere. For every ship they destroy, 2 more will take its place. We will win by being too many to count, too many to stop." June was quiet for a long time. He looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth. He thought of the people on New Daegu. He thought of the boot coming for his own home. "It is a terrible plan," he said finally. "It will cost so many lives." "It is the only plan," Hana replied. "It is the only way we do not lose everything." June knew she was right. He gave the order. The plan was called Project Gurium, the Korean word for cloud. A cloud of ships. A cloud of death. Across Earth, the order went out. The planet shifted from peace to war. Car factories stopped making cars and started making ship parts. Shipyards that built cargo ships now built warships. It was not a happy noise. It was the sound of a world preparing for a fight it did not want. On a space station, the first of the small fighter ships, called Gnats, rolled off the assembly line. A pilot climbed into the tiny cockpit. He looked at the simple controls. He knew what this ship was for. He was a volunteer. He knew he would probably not come back. In his mining pod, Jin was finally found. A supply ship sent to check on the moon base found him. He was still sitting in his chair, staring at the cloud of dust that was once his home. They brought him back to Earth. He did not speak. He walked through the busy corridors of the main space station like a ghost. People were rushing everywhere. They were building and planning and training. The air was full of energy and fear. Jin felt none of it. He felt empty. He saw families on screens, and he saw Mireille and Day. He heard laughter, and he heard the silence after the feed went dead. A man in a uniform approached him. It was Admiral June. "Jin," the Admiral said, "I knew you from your service record. You are a good engineer." Jin did not look at him. He looked at a wall. "We have a project," June said. "It is called Gurium. We are building small attack ships. Many of them. They need to be simple. They need to be reliable. They need to be built fast. We need someone who can make things work. We need your help." Jin finally turned his head. His eyes were dark and hollow. "Why?" he asked. His voice was rough from not being used. "To fight back," June said. "To make sure what happened to New Daegu does not happen to Earth." Jin was silent for a moment. He thought of the Kalon ships, so calm and powerful. He thought of their cold digital voice. The organic infestation will be cleansed. He was not an infestation. Mirai was not an infestation. Day was not an infestation. They were a family. They were a garden. The cold feeling in his chest, the wrath, began to burn. It needed a purpose. It needed a direction. "Show me the designs," Jin said. He was no longer a ghost. He was an engineer again. But he was not fixing a little garden robot anymore. He was going to help build a weapon. a weapon of clouds and wrath. The heart of Project Gurium was a place called Shipyard Zero. It was not a place on Earth. It was a huge, hollowed-out asteroid in deep space. Inside, the noise was deafening. Machines roared. Metal screeched as it was cut and welded. Sparks fell like angry rain. This was where the hive carriers were born. Jin stood on a high walkway looking down at the chaos. He held a datapad with the plans for the Gnat fighter. It was a simple design, just as Hana had said. An engine, a cockpit, a navigation computer, and one large warhead. There was no shield. No fancy weapons. Its job was to fly fast and hit hard. Once. His job was to make sure it could do that job perfectly. He had been working for weeks. The emptiness inside him was still there, but now it was filled with a sharp focus. He did not smile. He did not talk to people unless it was about work. He saw problems in the Gnat's engine cooling system. He saw a weakness in the cockpit wiring. He fixed them. He made the simple ship even simpler, more reliable, more deadly. A young woman with a sharp voice came onto the main floor. It was Hana. She was arguing with a group of engineers. "The power coupling is inefficient," she said, pointing at a part of the Gnat's engine. "It wastes 0.03% of the energy output. That is energy that could be used for a faster burst of speed at the final moment. Fix it." The engineers looked tired. They argued that 0.03% was nothing. "It did not matter. Everything matters." Hana's voice cut through the factory noise. "When you are facing an enemy that can destroy a planet, every bit of power matters. Every second matters. Make it better." She turned and saw Jin watching her. She walked over to him. Her eyes were bright and intense. "You are Jin," she said. It was not a question. "You improved the ignition sequence. It starts half a second faster now, good." Jin just nodded. He saw that she was like him. She was not here for glory. She was here to win. He respected that. "They call my plan a swarm," Hana said, looking down at the rows of gnat frames being built. "But a swarm of bees is disorganized. This will not be. This will be a storm, a calculated, directed storm. Every gnat will be a drop of rain. Together they will become a flood." She showed him her datapad. It showed a map of space with thousands of little dots. "I will control them. Not all by myself, of course, but the strategy, the patterns, they will move like a single mind, my mind." At that moment, a loud commotion came from a newly arrived transport ship. A group of soldiers in combat gear marched down the ramp. Their leader was a broad-shouldered man with a serious face. His name was Chul. He was a sergeant. Chul looked around the shipyard with a scowl. He saw the engineers and the scientists. He saw the fragile-looking gnat fighters. "This is it?" he said to the officer greeting him. "This is what we are betting everything on? These little toys?" "They are not toys, Sergeant," the officer said. Chul spat on the clean floor. "They look like toys. My job is to protect the hive carriers, to stop the enemy from boarding us. How am I supposed to do that if our main weapon is a bunch of firecrackers?" A young soldier followed Chul. His name was Su. He was different from the sergeant. He looked at the gnats with wide, curious eyes. He was not a fighter. He was a tech specialist. His job was to operate the communication drones and help with the gnat control systems. "Look, Sergeant," Su said, his voice eager. "The design is brilliant in its simplicity. The energy-to-thrust ratio is quiet, Su," Chul grumbled. "Don't hurt yourself thinking so hard." But he let the young man talk. Chul was a practical man. He knew he needed someone like Su, even if he didn't understand half of what he said. Later, Jin was testing a new engine valve when he heard Chul's voice again. The sergeant was yelling at a poor engineer about the design of the hive ship's airlock doors. "They are too weak," Chul shouted. "A focused plasma cutter will get through that in 10 seconds. My men need more time to set up a defense." The engineer tried to explain about weight limits and structural integrity. Chul was not listening. Jin walked over. He had been quiet for so long that his voice was rough. "Reinforce the inner frame with a cross brace of titanium alloy," he said. He didn't look at Chul. He looked at the door. "It will add minimal weight. It will force a cutter to make 2 cuts instead of 1. It will buy you 20 more seconds." Chul stopped yelling. He looked at Jin. He saw a man who knew how things worked. 20 seconds can save a lot of lives," Chul said, his voice quieter now. Jin finally looked at him. "I know." In that moment, an understanding passed between them. The soldier and the engineer, they were both building a wall against the coming darkness. One with a gun, the other with a wrench. Weeks turned into months. The first hive carrier was finished. It was a monstrous thing like a floating city. It had huge mouths to eat asteroids. Inside its belly, factories could build 100 gnat fighters every day. The first fleet of gnats was ready. 10,000 ships. They sat in neat rows inside the hive like seeds in a pod. Admiral June came to Shipyard Zero for the final briefing. He stood in the main control room with Hana, Jin, Chul, and Sue. The Kalan Armada has been spotted moving towards the Sirius system, June said. There is a small research colony there. We believe they are the next target. He looked at each of them. His face was grim. This is it. We will engage the enemy there. Hana, you will control the swarm. Jin, you will keep the hive systems running. Chul, you will protect the hive. Sue, you will be our eyes and ears. He paused. We cannot lose this ship. If the hive is destroyed, we lose our ability to make new fighters. The war is over. The room was silent. The weight of the moment was heavy on everyone. Later, Jin walked through the quiet hangar of the hive carrier. The 10,000 gnat fighters sat in the dark, waiting. He stopped by one of them. He put his hand on its cold metal hull. He thought of Mirai and Day. He thought of the garden. He was not just an engineer fixing a machine anymore. He was a man preparing for a storm he helped to create. The cold feeling in his chest was now a steady burning fire. It was almost time. The Kalan Armada moved through the void. Their ships were silent and perfect. They moved like a slow, dark tide. In the lead ship, the Kalan commander watched the star map. A small blinking light marked the human research colony in the Sirius system. It was another infestation, another weed to be pulled. He felt no excitement, no anger. This was simply his purpose, to cleanse, to order the chaos of the galaxy. On the bridge of the human hive carrier, the mood was very different. It was tense and quiet. Admiral June stood with his hands behind his back. Hana sat at her control station, her fingers resting lightly on the screen. Her face was calm, but her heart was beating fast. Jin was in the engineering room below. He watched the power levels for the hive and the gnat launch systems. Everything was green. Everything was ready. He felt a strange calm. The waiting was almost over. Sergeant Chul was with his soldiers. They were stationed at key points throughout the hive carrier, the airlocks, the engine room, the command deck. They checked their weapons. They did not speak much. Chul walked down the line, slapping men on the shoulder, giving a firm nod. He was a rock for his team. Young Sue was at his own station, his screens showing a view of space from many small drones he had launched. He was the eyes of the ship. The enemy fleet is entering the system, Sue said, his voice clear over the comms. They are forming their attack line. The lead dreadnought is powering its main weapon. On the main screen, everyone could see it. The giant Kalan ship began to glow with that terrible purple light. It was aiming at the small planet below. Now, Admiral June said, his voice quiet but firm. Hana's fingers danced across her screen. She did not look up. Launching Swarm 1, all gnats, pattern Delta. Deep inside the hive carrier, giant doors slid open. From the darkness, 10,000 points of light emerged. The gnat fighters poured out into space. They did not fly out in a neat formation. They spread out like a cloud of angry insects. They moved in a strange, swirling pattern impossible to predict. The Kalan commander saw them on his sensor screen. 1,000 new contacts, then 5,000, then 10,000. He felt a flicker of something. Not fear, annoyance. What was this? These were not warships. They were small, weak signals. It was like seeing gnats buzzing around his head. He gave a mental command. The smaller ships in his fleet, the escorts, moved forward. Their weapons glowed. Beams of red energy shot out, slicing through the cloud of gnats. The first wave of human ships vanished. 50, 100, 200. They exploded into silent fireballs. On the human bridge, Hana did not flinch. They are taking the bait, she whispered. Swarm 1, engage pattern Theta. Draw the escorts away from the dreadnought. The cloud of gnats changed shape. It split into two. One part swarmed around the Kalan escorts, distracting them. The other, larger part, ignored the small ships and shot straight towards the big dreadnought. The dreadnought's purple light was almost ready to fire at the planet. "Swarm 2, commit to the attack run," Hana said. "Target the forward shield matrix. Remember the dip." Thousands of Nat fighters turned and flew directly at the giant ship. They were so small and so fast. The dreadnought's point defense guns opened fire. They shot down dozens of Nats every second. Space was filled with tiny flashes of light. It was a massacre. But for every Nat that died, 3 more took its place. The Kalan commander felt his annoyance grow. This was a waste of time. He ordered the dreadnought to fire its main weapon. The purple light flashed, obliterating a whole section of the swarm. Hundreds of Nats vanished in an instant. But in that instant, as Hana knew it would, the dreadnought's shield flickered. "Now!" Hana shouted. The remaining Nats in the attack group saw the opening. They shot forward like arrows. They ignored the guns that were trying to shoot them. They ignored everything but the big ship. The first Nat reached the shield and exploded. Then another. Then 10 more. They were not trying to penetrate the shield. They were overloading it. They were hitting the same spot again and again with the force of their own destruction. A crack appeared in the Kalan shield. A tiny hole. One last Nat, piloted by a volunteer named Lee, saw the hole. He did not hesitate. He pushed his engine to its limit. He flew straight through the crack. His small ship slammed directly into the hull of the Kalan dreadnought. The explosion was not as big as the dreadnought's main gun, but it was in the worst possible place. It tore a huge hole in the ship's side. Atmosphere and fire burst out into space. The dreadnought listed to one side. The purple light in its main weapon died. On the human bridge, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then, a cheer went up. They had done it. They had wounded a giant. But the battle was not over. The Kalan escorts, now angry and without their leader's command, turned their full attention on the human hive carrier. "Enemy ships are breaking through the swarm," Sue yelled. "They are heading for us." Beams of red energy slammed into the hive carrier's shields. The whole ship shook. Admiral June held onto his chair. "Evasive maneuvers. All power to forward shields." Hana was still focused on her screen. "Swarm 3. Defensive perimeter. Protect the hive." But there were not enough Nats left. They had sacrificed most of them to hurt the dreadnought. A Kalan cruiser got too close. It fired a volley of plasma torpedoes. The hive carrier's shields flared bright and then failed. The torpedoes hit the hull. The sound was like a giant hammer hitting the ship. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. In the engineering room, Jin was thrown from his feet. He got up quickly. His screen was flashing red. "They hit us in Section 7. The main power conduit is damaged. We are losing pressure." On the command deck, Chul's voice came over the comms. "They are boarding us. I repeat, enemy boarders in Section 7. My team is moving to engage." The real fight for the hive carrier had just begun. The battle in space was one thing. The battle inside the ship, in its dark and narrow corridors, would be another. The storm was no longer outside. It was inside with them. The alarm in Section 7 was a shrill screaming sound. Red lights flashed in the smoky corridor. The Kalan boarding pod had torn through the hull like a metal fist. Now the invaders were inside. Sergeant Chul led his team down the corridor. They moved in a tight group, their boots echoing on the metal floor. They turned a corner and saw them. The Kalan soldiers were tall. They wore dark, sleek armor that seemed to absorb the light. They did not have faces you could see, just a smooth, dark visor. They moved with a quiet, terrifying grace. Their weapons glowed with a soft green light. "Open fire," Chul yelled. The corridor exploded with noise. Human bullets sparked against Kalan armor. The Kalans fired back with beams of green energy. The beams melted the metal walls. A soldier next to Chul cried out and fell, his chest armor vaporized. Chul gritted his teeth. Their guns were not very effective. The Kalan armor was too strong. They were losing ground. In the engineering room, Jin felt the ship shake from the fighting. His screen showed the damage. A fire in Section 7, a breach in the oxygen system. But he also saw something else. The internal camera feed showed Chul's team being pushed back. He saw the Kalins. He saw their cold, efficient movements. He saw them kill another human soldier, and something in him snapped. This was not a battle in space anymore. This was a fight for his home. Again. He grabbed a heavy wrench and a plasma torch from his toolkit. He was an engineer. This ship was his machine, and these invaders were a problem he needed to fix. Jin, what are you doing? An assistant yelled. Seal the door behind me, Jin said, his voice cold. He ran out into the corridor. He did not run towards the fight like a soldier. He ran through a maintenance shaft, a narrow tunnel used for repairing pipes and wires. He knew the ship better than anyone. He came out in a corridor behind the Kalan soldiers. They were focused on Chul's team. They did not see him. Jin looked at the ceiling. He saw a large pipe carrying supercooled coolant for the engine. He raised his plasma torch. He did not need to break the pipe. He just needed to weaken a joint. He fired the torch. The metal glowed red and then white. A jet of freezing liquid burst from the pipe, spraying directly onto the Kalan soldiers. Their advanced armor was strong against bullets and energy beams. But it was not designed for a sudden extreme cold. The metal of their armor became brittle. It cracked. The soldiers stumbled, their movement slowing. Chul saw his chance. Now aim for the cracks. His soldiers fired. This time the bullets found their mark. They punched through the broken armor. One Kalan soldier fell. Then another. Jin moved to the next problem. The fire. He crawled to an emergency control panel. He rerouted the power, isolating the damaged section. Then he opened the vents, sucking the oxygen out of the burning corridor. The flames died, suffocated. He was not a soldier. He was a mechanic. And he was fixing his broken ship. On the bridge, the situation was getting worse. The Kalan cruisers surrounded them. The Hive carrier's shields were down. Its weapons were failing. Admiral June looked at the main screen. They were losing. The Kalan fleet was too strong. He saw the enemy command ship, a different one from the wounded dreadnought directing the attack. It was hanging back, safe. He knew what he had to do. It was a terrible thing, but it was the only way. He turned to his first officer. You have the bridge. The officer looked confused. Sir? June walked to a small, fast ship docked near the bridge. It was called a shuttle. It was not a warship. He got inside. He input a course, straight for the Kalan command ship. He opened a channel to Hana. Hana, when I give the signal, you throw everything we have left at that ship. Everything. Hana understood. Her face went pale. Admiral, June, you can't. It is an order, June said, his voice calm. The Hive must survive. Earth must survive. This is the only way. He closed the channel. He flew his small shuttle out of the Hive carrier. He flew straight towards the heart of the enemy fleet. The Kalans saw him. They thought he was trying to escape. Or maybe he was crazy. They fired at him. He dodged and weaved. He was a good pilot. But he was not trying to fight. He was just trying to get closer. He was almost there. The Kalan command ship filled his view. He could see the details on its hull. He opened the channel one last time. Now, Hana, for Earth. He pushed the engine to full power. His small shuttle became a missile. It slammed into the bridge of the Kalan command ship. The explosion was bright and silent in the vacuum of space. On the human bridge, everyone was quiet. They had just watched their leader die. Hana wiped a tear from her eye. Then her face became hard. She turned to her screen. All remaining Nats, she said, her voice sharp and clear. Attack pattern Omega. The command ship is dead. Their coordination is broken. Swarm them. Destroy them all. The few hundred Nat fighters that were left, along with the human warships, surged forward. The Kalan fleet, without its leader, became confused. Their ships moved without purpose. They started to crash into each other. The human ships attacked like wolves. They tore the enemy apart. Slowly, the battle ended. The last Kalan ship was destroyed. The Sirius system was quiet again. On the Hive carrier, the fires were out. The Kalan boarders were dead. Chul and his soldiers stood in the smoky corridor, tired but alive. Jin put down his wrench. He looked at his hands. They were dirty and cut. He had helped save the ship. But it did not feel like a victory. It felt like survival. It was cold and hard. He looked out a viewport at the wreckage of the Kalan fleet. He thought of Admiral June. He had given his life so they could live. The war was not over. It was only just beginning, but they had won this battle. They had proven that the humans could fight back, and they would remember this day. They would remember the price. The silence after the battle was heavy. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of exhaustion. The hive carrier was wounded. Its hull was scarred and blackened. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and burned metal. People moved slowly, their faces tired and grim. The cost of their victory was everywhere. On screens, they showed the lists of the dead. The pilots of the Nat fighters, Admiral June, the soldiers who had fought the borders. So many names. Jin walked through the damaged sections of the ship. Crews were already working, welding broken beams and patching holes. He stopped to help a team reroute a bundle of sparking wires. His hands moved automatically. He did the work, but his mind was far away. He thought of the garden on New Daegu. He thought of Mirei's smile. He thought of Day's laugh. For a long time, those memories had been like a sharp knife in his heart. Now the pain was different. It was not as sharp. It was a deep, sad ache. He had wanted revenge. He had wanted to make the Kalans feel the pain he felt. But watching Admiral June fly his ship into the enemy, he understood something. This was not about revenge anymore. It was about protection. June had not died for hate. He died for hope. He died so that others could have a future. Sergeant Chul found him near the engine room. Chul's arm was in a sling. He had a cut on his face. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "You fight good for an engineer," Chul said, his voice rough. "You held the line for a mechanic," Jin replied. They stood together for a moment, looking at the repairs. They did not need to say much. They had faced death together. That was a stronger bond than words. On the bridge, Hana was not resting. She was studying the data from the battle. She saw how the Kalan fleet had fallen apart without its leader. She saw the effectiveness of the swarm, but she also saw the problems. The Nats were too weak on their own. They needed better tactics. Sue came to her station. The young operator looked older now. He had seen things he could never forget. "The communication drones are back online," Sue said. "We have a clear channel to Earth." Hana nodded. "Send the message. Tell them we were successful. But tell them the price." Sue turned to leave, then stopped. "Hana, what happens now?" Hana looked at her screen. It showed a star map. The Kalan Armada was vast. This had only been one small part of it. They had cut off a finger, but the body was still coming. "Now," Hana said softly, "we get ready for the next one. We make the swarm bigger. We make it smarter. We learn. We adapt." Weeks passed. The hive carrier, named the Gurium Wanan, was repaired. It was stronger now. The lessons from the battle were used to make it better. The airlock doors were stronger, just as Jin and Chul had wanted. The Nat fighters were improved, with faster engines and better computers. New hive carriers were being built in Shipyard Zero. The cloud was growing. One day, Jin was in the main hangar. A new batch of Nat fighters was being loaded. A young pilot was checking his ship. He looked nervous. He saw Jin and walked over. "Sir, you are Engineer Jin, right?" the pilot asked. "Yes," Jin said. I was there." "At Sirius," the pilot said. "I saw what you did in the corridors." "Thank you." Jin looked at the young man's face. He saw the fear in his eyes, but he also saw determination. "What is your name?" Jin asked. "Kang," the pilot said. "Be careful out there, Kang," Jin said. It was a simple thing to say, but he meant it. He realized then that this was his new garden. Not a garden of plants, but a garden of people. This ship, these pilots, these soldiers. He would help them grow. He would help them survive. A meeting was held on the bridge. Hana, Jin, Chul, and Sue were there. They stood around the main table. A new admiral was there too, but everyone knew the real team was this one. The scientist, the engineer, the soldier, and the operator. "The Kalan main fleet has changed course," the new admiral said. "They are not heading for another colony. They are coming for us. They know we are a threat now." "Good," Hana said. Her voice was cold. "Let them come. We will be ready." She showed them her new plans. The swarm would not just be Nats now. There would be different types of ships. Fast scouts, heavy bombers disguised as Nats, electronic warfare ships to confuse the enemy. The cloud would have a brain and a sting. Chul showed his plans for defense. More barricades inside the ship, better weapons for his soldiers. He had learned how the Kalans fought. He would be ready for them. Sue explained how his drones could now create false signals, making the enemy think there were more human ships than there really were. Jin listened. He looked at their faces. Hana driven and brilliant. Chol strong and reliable. So young and clever. They were all different, but they were together. He was not alone in his anger anymore. His wrath had been a cold, lonely thing. Now it was a shared fire. It warmed him. It gave him strength. The final scene shows the Gurium Wantor floating in space. It is not alone. Around it are 2 other hive carriers, and around them a cloud of ships so large it darkens the stars. Hundreds of thousands of gnats. A storm waiting to be unleashed. Inside his engineering room, Jin looks at a small picture on his desk. It is a picture of Mirai and Day in their garden. He smiles a little. It is a sad smile, but it is not broken. He turns to his work. He has to check the new engine designs. There is much to do. The galaxy is a dangerous place. The Kalan Armadas are beyond count. They are powerful and merciless. But humanity is no longer sleeping. Earth's wrath is awake. It is not a blind rage. It is a cold, smart, and determined force. It is a force that builds and protects. It is a force that learns. The war is far from over. But for the first time, there is hope. The garden may be gone, but the seeds have been scattered on the wind, and they are growing into a forest.